When looking for a reason that World War I started, we have to consider both the actions that sparked the war and the underlying tensions that fueled the conflict. If we take the metaphor of a fire, the spark would be the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. The fuel would be four main logs: imperialism, a lot of empires with aims of expansion; alliances, the grouping of these empires into two opposing camps, the Triple Entente and the Triple Alliance; militarism, outdated ideas of war as natural and glorious, coupled with modern developments in technology and military planning; and nationalism, states fighting for the independence of ethnic groups, also the idea that some nations are inherently superior to others. When looking for the cause of the First World War, it is worth remembering that we can never trace the conflict back to a single definitive action. Seemingly insignificant actions, like the flap of a butterfly's wings, can have a knock-on effect and change the course of world history. Even if some nations are more culpable than others, pinning the blame on any individual nation is likely to be an oversimplification. Militarism. Towards the end of the 19th century, all the major powers in Europe were preparing for war. Nations stockpiled weapons and munitions for their new vast armies. Most people expected a short war, relying on speedy transport of armies and weaponry. Britain was expanding its massive navy, and most of continental Europe set up conscription systems to man their armies. Germany entered into a naval race with Britain, with both sides manufacturing large dreadnought ships. The Kaiserliche Marine narrowed the gap between the two navies, but never came close to equaling Britain's Royal Navy, which was the strongest in the world. Significantly, the naval race ended in 1912, 2 years before the outbreak of the war. Alliances. Europe was split into two opposing camps, the Triple Alliance and the Triple Entente. The Triple Alliance was formed from Germany, Italy, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In response, France and Russia entered into an alliance of their own. Britain then entered into an informal alliance with both Russia and France, creating the Triple Entente. The Entente was not a binding military alliance, but more of a general policy to support French, Russian, and British interests. The Triple Entente also served to stabilize the borders of the French, British, and Russian empires, aiming to avoid any territorial disputes with one another. Which leads us to the third factor, imperialism. By the start of the 20th century, many European powers had established colonies across the world, exploiting foreign nations' natural resources and indigenous populations. Those with extensive empires were keen to ensure their continuation and avoid either local revolt or seizure of lands by another empire, hence the creation of the Triple Entente. 40 years before World War I, France had fought a war with Prussia, in which it was badly defeated. Prussia unified with other states to become a powerful German empire, and took the region of Alsace-Lorraine from France. The French wanted revenge, while the Germans were looking to expand on the world stage. The term Weltpolitik describes Germany's new aims of an assertive foreign policy, the acquiring of overseas territories, and the building of a large navy. These aims were at odds with those of the existing imperial powers in the Triple Entente. A couple of diplomatic crises between Germany and the Triple Entente occurred in Morocco in 1905 and 1911. The French sent troops to Morocco to establish a protectorate there. Germany had its own imperial ambitions for North Africa, and reacted by sending a gunboat to the Moroccan port of Agadir. The resulting row ended with closer ties between Britain and France, and a more isolated Germany. The relative isolation and encirclement of Germany encouraged unconditionless support for its main ally, the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The final factor was nationalism. Nationalism is the belief that your country is inherently better than others. As you can see, many of the factors already explored were based on nationalist sentiment across Europe at the beginning of the 20th century. Social Darwinism was a popular idea amongst academics at the time that stated only the fittest ethnic groups deserved to survive. This particularly played into the struggle between Germanic and Slavic nations in Eastern Europe. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was formed of many national and ethnic groups, some of which wanted independence. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was formed of many national and ethnic groups, some of whom wanted independence. One of these groups were the Slavs, who were the main ethnic group in the Balkans and Russia. The Austro-Hungarian Empire annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina in 1908, which upset the very fragile balance of power in the region, and greatly angered Russia. Russia was humiliated by this control of Slavic lands by a foreign empire, but was too weak to respond militarily. Over the course of the Balkan Wars, which occurred 1912 to 1913, 3 Balkan states gained independence from the Ottoman Empire. Serbia in particular was strengthened and was pushing for the unification of the South Slavic peoples. This in turn weakened Austria-Hungary, who would have liked to expand in this area, and considered Serbia an enemy. Following the Balkan Wars, Russia supported the Slavic populations in the newly independent Balkan states. France closely supported Russia, stating that if war broke out between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, France would stand with Russia in supporting the Serbs. In contrast, Germany was unwilling to support Austria-Hungary in a war against Serbia and her allies. With this complex tangle of empires, alliances, militaries and nationalist fervour, the stage was set for the event that would trigger the First World War, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir presumptive to the Austro-Hungarian throne. July Crisis. Sarajevo, 27th of June 1914. A Serbian terrorist launches a bomb at Archduke Franz Ferdinand's motorcar, but it bounces off the rear and detonates the car directly behind. The next day, Franz and his wife Sophie drive to the hospital to visit the wounded, but their driver takes a wrong turn and has to back up. To the world's misfortune, the young assassin and co-conspirator in yesterday's plot, Gavrilo Princip, steps forward and fatally shoots the Archduke and his wife. Now Austria is angry and suspects the Serbian government played a role in the assassination. History gets a little blurry here, but Princip and his co-conspirators were part of the Young Bosnians movement, who were supplied by the Black Hand Society, which had, in turn, got ties to the Serbian military. What's more, Franz Ferdinand was one of the more moderate voices in Austrian politics, so his murder removed one of the barriers to war. From this point on, it's useful to see the dates of how events unfolded in a domino fashion. July 6th. Germany hands Austria-Hungary the so-called blank check, offering unconditional support for any military action it seeks to take against Serbia. July 20th. France and Russia agree in opposing any punitive Austrian measures towards Serbia. July 23rd. Austria hands Serbia an ultimatum with a list of 10 severe demands, giving them only 48 hours to reply. July 25th. The Tsar approves secret partial mobilization of over 1 million men, the first power to mobilize their troops. This escalates the risk of war massively. On the same day, emboldened by Russian support, Serbia rejects Austria's ultimatum. On the 28th of July, Austria-Hungary becomes the first nation to declare war against Serbia. The 29th of July, the Russian Tsar orders general mobilization. In the evening, he changes his mind back to partial mobilization, and then the next day, he decides on general mobilization after all. Due to bad planning, the Russians' partial mobilization would be incompatible with a general mobilization, so they were left in an all-or-nothing scenario. Following Russian mobilization, Germany declares war on Russia on the 1st of August, and following France's mobilization, declares war on France on the 3rd. German forces march through Belgium on the 4th, following the Schlieffen Plan, knock out France quick by marching through the Low Countries, and then come back and polish off the slow-moving Russian forces. However, the Belgians put up a strong defence, and Britain declares war on Germany, officially on the basis that they violated Belgian neutrality, but mainly for other strategic reasons. the British actually had contingency plans to blockade Belgian ports to limit German supplies in event of war, thereby planning to violate Belgian neutrality themselves. Many more powers would become involved in the war: the US, the Ottoman Empire, Japan and others, and many more frontiers would open up across the globe, in Africa, the Middle East and Asia. But by the 4th of August, all the major powers involved in World War I were officially at war. Over the course of the next 4 years, 17 million would die, and over 20 million more would be injured. To recap, the factors that facilitated the First World War were imperial powers with expansionist aims, that were grouped into two opposing camps by a complex alliance system, all holding the widespread belief that war is glorious and a useful tool to build nations.